America, bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt inside the Beltway live on this Wednesday morning. There was a major earthquake outside of Acapulco, Mexico City as well. Felt it last night. Near Acapulco, it was measured at 7.1 magnitude and fairly shallow. At least one person is dead. It occurred at 9 p.m. Mexico time, so most people were home on a Tuesday night. Hopefully that will protect people. No reports on damage yet. We'll keep you posted with breaking news throughout the day. Secretary of State Tony Blinken spent most of yesterday in Doha, in Qatar, begging the Taliban to let American citizens and permanent residents out. He didn't make much progress. Meanwhile, Joe, this is what the Secretary of State said yesterday, cut number 11.
Without personnel on the ground, we can't verify the accuracy of manifests, the identities of passengers, flight plans, or aviation security protocols. So this is a challenge. Without personnel.
It's a challenge. What it is, it's a hostage situation, and the Taliban are toying with the Secretary of State. Meanwhile, the American people know what has happened. Joe Biden made a trip to New Jersey yesterday where he was heckled. Here's just a sampling of the heckling that will trail him, I believe, for the rest of his life. Cut number 22. You hear people shouting, you left. That's just going to go on wherever Joe Biden goes. So the only answer Democrats have is what Chuck Schumer did in this conversation yesterday in a visit to New York. The majority leader just lies. Cut number 10.
We've heard a lot of the pullout of Afghanistan would have gone somewhat poorly no matter who did it. But it's on Joe Biden's watch as president. How will what happened affect Democrats' chances moving into the midterms?
You know, I can't predict that. I will say there'll be a job for congressional oversight. There always is. But at the moment, actually, I'm still focused on trying to get some of those brave Afghans out. The Americans, all of whom wanted to come out, have come out, praise God. But there are a lot of Afghans.
That's just a lie. You know that's a lie. I know that's a lie. There are 19 Americans on airplanes at Mazar-e-Sharif. And there are hundreds of Americans and thousands of permanent residents, green card holders stranded throughout the country. So they're just going to lie. And we're going to remember to pray for those Americans abandoned in Afghanistan every single day. How much does Joe Biden even know about this? I don't know. Here's the clip of Joe Biden that you probably saw last night if you were scrolling around the internet. Cut number 7, the president talking about tornadoes.
You know, the members of Congress know from their colleagues in Congress that, the looks like a tornado, they don't call them that anymore, that hit the crops and wetlands in the middle of the country, and Iowa and Nevada, and I mean, it's just across the board. And, as I said, we're in this together. And
yeah, I still call them tornadoes. People still call them tornadoes. You know, the president is just not clicking right there. Congressman Michael Waltz went on with John Roberts. You can't, unless you're watching on YouTube or on my Rumble channel or on HughHewitt.com or in the Universe, you won't be able to see this. But listen, and he explains it at the end. This is Congressman Michael Waltz. Again, my son works for Michael Waltz, so I usually get his clips in the morning. Here's what Congressman Waltz said yesterday on Fox when he was talking with John Roberts.
You know what I want to hear? And not so much me. All of these veterans, the Gold Star families, we have 13 new ones now, victims of 9/11 as we head into the 20th anniversary. Who is going to stand up and say, I screwed up? This was on me. This did not go right. Instead, we hear officials, including the president, blaming others, saying this was, a lot of happy talk, that this was a record evaluation. Who is going to take responsibility? Publicly and officially, because this was a chaotic disaster that's going to be a stain on the United States. And for so many of these groups that are just been so badly affected on their own psyche and on their souls for years to come. That's what we want to hear. We want to hear accountability and responsibility.
Congressman, I apologize to you and our audience. I chuckled when you said that because I don't expect that will happen.
You see, I was watching. Michael Waltz is probably looking into a camera like I am right now, and I'm not able to see if I'm interviewing someone on the other side very often. Sometimes I can if I got a split screen going and there's a camera on the other side. But most members who do stand-ups outside of the Congress can't see John Roberts. And when Congressman Waltz said someone's got to stand up and take responsibility, John Roberts went, "Yeah, right." Like this gang is ever going to do anything except what Chuck Schumer did and lie. And so John Roberts was doing an honorable thing. His audience saw him, shake his head and say, "Sure, that's never going to happen." Meanwhile, the Taliban has appointed their new government. Here's what we know, according to the New York Times. It's a very long article. I'm holding it up if you're watching on YouTube. Very long article. You know what you need to know? They're killers. They're all killers. The old Taliban is the new Taliban. They crushed protests around Kabul yesterday, just beat people up, threw women in jail all night long. The Wall Street Journal reports, in an appointment that would complicate any recognition of the new government by Western nations, Sirajuddin Haqqani, designated a global terrorist by D.C. because of his close links to al-Qaeda, and the Haqqani network that he heads, was named Minister of the Interior with oversight of Afghanistan's police and internal security. The FBI currently offers a reward of up to $5 million for information leading to his arrest. So Mr. Haqqani is the Tony Soprano, only far more violent than Tony Soprano, of Afghanistan. So what do you need to know about the new Taliban government? The Financial Times quoted the head of the American University in Kabul, who is still somehow alive. I'm glad to hear that. In our region of the world, every time someone says caretaker or interim, it never necessarily means a temporary setup. The Taliban, on the face of this, will use this as an excuse to explain why the government isn't inclusive. I don't think the international community is going to buy it. The Taliban's indifference to international recognition is alarming. Of course there weren't any women. Of course there weren't any moderates. They didn't include Karzai. They didn't include Abdullah. They didn't include anyone who didn't flee the country, because they're thugs and killers and criminals and terrorists. And that's why they're holding Americans hostage, and why Tony Blinken is negotiating or begging. He's not negotiating with them. He's begging the Qataris to help us. I love the headline in Fox News. 4 prisoners President Obama exchanged for Bo Bergdahl are now in senior Taliban posts, from Gitmo to the government. That's the way of the Taliban. Other headlines yesterday: Democrats and lobbyists gird for battle over far-reaching tax increases. The Democrats are so desperate to get your attention off of the Americans abandoned in Afghanistan, both the citizens and the green card holders. Are so desperate that they're willing to talk about how much they're going to raise taxes on you. And if you own a home anywhere near an affluent part of the country, any part of the coast, you're along a river or a stream or a Lake Erie or something like that, you're going to get hit by the estate tax, because this is going to now go down. They're going to reintroduce the death tax. Right now there's an $11 million exemption that's going away. It's going down to $1 million. So if you have an estate more than $1 million, your kids will have to sell whatever they have or whatever they inherit to pay 40% of that to the government. That's what the Democrats want to do. They want to tax everybody. Small businesses, farmers are all screwed. People who have grandma and grandpa in a house that they want to inherit, they're screwed. Basically, the Biden Democrats are like the President Xi Jinping speech yesterday, where he tells Chinese tycoons are going to have to share the wealth. Well, except Biden doesn't mean tycoons. He means basically anyone who owns a house in a moderately expensive neighborhood. You're going to get taxed at death. Double tax, because you got taxed on the money you paid your house with. Your mortgage payments weren't tax deductible. So if you bought that house over 30 years and it's gone up in value, it appreciated, the government used to say, that's yours, you keep that, you earned that, you bought that. Now Joe Biden wants to say that's ours, you pay us 40% of that. There is also an alarming report in the Financial Times about Biden's COVID booster shot plan mired in confusion amid regulatory holdups. They can't figure anything out. This is the gang that couldn't shoot straight. I know that President Trump upset some of you. He was mean and crude and vulgar, and a lot of you thought he was angry and ego-driven and often insulted and unnecessarily so, and that the Twitter was very annoying. But he got the vaccine done. He got it distributed. Joe Biden has now been there 8 months, and they can't even decide what to do about boosters. You're supposed to be getting the boosters 8 months after your second shot, and they're screwing it up. Meanwhile, Intel is expanding by $95 billion worth chip making in Europe. They're not bringing that expansion to the United States. You think that would have happened under Donald Trump? They're taking it to Europe, according to the Wall Street Journal. And this news I like. I want to end with a little bit of good news. I'm going to play a lot of my interview with Chris Wallace yesterday because much of it didn't make it on air, so I'm going to play it this hour and next. The trouble with airports and how to fix them. Here's the good news for the day. Most airports have figured out that people don't want TVs on. They don't want CNN blaring at them. They don't want anything on. They want to sit quietly. So thank God airports are finally figuring out that if you have to be in there for 4 hours, the last thing you want to watch is Don Lemon. Stay tuned, America. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt inside the Beltway Live. As President Biden gets heckled wherever he goes for leaving Americans behind, I took up Selena Zito's most recent column about President Biden breaking his promise to return us to normal and thought, boy, this is appropriate. Selena Zito joins us. Good morning, Selena.
Good morning. How are you?
I am great. I love this paragraph from your new column. In response, Joe Biden refuses to take up questions on Afghanistan, an optic many believe is not what pragmatists signed up for, nor did they sign up for trying to change the Supreme Court in wild spending. Exit poll data shows Biden won because voters were looking for a candidate with good judgment and someone who could unite the country. Do you think they were looking for a candidate who would abandon hundreds, if not thousands, of Americans and permanent residents in Afghanistan to the Taliban, Selena?
No, absolutely not. Biden has delivered the exact opposite of what voters were looking for. After 4 years of Trump, in particular after the first year of the pandemic, people were exhausted, and they bought into the lie, as we are finding out now, that Biden promised that he was going to bring things back to normal. The presidency and the country was going to, but in particular, the presidency was going to return to normal. And he promised to be a more empathetic president. However, that is not what he has delivered. You know, voters, I've said this to you on this show several times, voters keep sending a message to Washington with their vote, and Washington keeps misreading it and doing the exact opposite of what voters sent them to D.C. for. And Biden is doing the same thing.
Yeah, we thought it was Happy Joe. It turns out it's the grouchy old man that Clint Eastwood played in Gran Torino, and that he may be playing in his new movie about Macho, Cry Macho. And Clint Eastwood plays a grumpy old man pretty well, and Cry Macho is going to be in theaters next week, by the way, and then it's on HBO Max. Are you going to watch Cry Macho, Selena?
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. Clint Eastwood is doing aging better than anybody, right?
No, right? He does it appropriately and authentically, and he's not pretending to be something that he can't fulfill.
That's it. He plays a washed-up horse breeder and rodeo star with one last mission. So he's going to play a grumpy old man who knows how to be a grumpy old man. Joe Biden is clueless, and the idea that he won't take questions, you brought this up in your column, that is completely inconsistent with the American expectation of a president.
Absolutely. One of the things that Donald Trump was incredibly good at was always answering the press, always taking questions. There was an availability to him, whether you liked what he thought or not. You knew what he was thinking. It was always out there. And so Biden has come across doing the exact opposite. I think he believes that's what the American people want. Once again, he's misread what the voters sent him to D.C. for. I mean, I don't believe he understands how much what has happened in Afghanistan has impacted the psyche of the American people.
I agree with you. By the way, do you think the American people care about these people that we have abandoned in Afghanistan? This is the big debate. The Team Biden has decided they're going to pretend that we don't know there's a hostage crisis. And they're going to try and downplay it. And Chuck Schumer said we got all the Americans out. We know better. We know there are thousands of permanent residents and American citizens who are stranded there. And we're not buying it. I think that's the case. What do you think?
Absolutely. They very much care. Look, this is part of the of what American exceptionalism is. is how we respond anytime there is a crisis. Think about when there was the first earthquakes in Haiti 10 years ago, or when there were what happened in Nicaragua when we were kids, or what happened over in I forget where that huge tsunami was about 7
Sri
or 8
Lanka.
years ago.
Yeah, Sri Lanka.
Right. Think about the outpouring from the American people. Think about all this, the money that we donated, the people that we sent there, the families that we welcomed back there. That has not gone away. That is still who we are. And they have made a calculation that if we don't talk about it, meaning the Biden administration, it's not going to happen. Look, I was talking to a former, whose name I will not use, a former Democratic congressman who in 2009, when the health care bill passed, I said to him at Capitol Hill, outside the Capitol, I said, what do you think of this? And he goes, American people are going to love this. This is great. And I said, I think you're wrong, sir. I think this is going to backfire, and you guys are going to lose in a big way. And just 2 days ago, I spoke to him again, and I said, what do you think about what's going on in Afghanistan? He said, they're going to forget about this. By the way, he lost in 2010 in that way.
Yep. We are not going to forget. And it's not because people like me will bring up praying for them every day. It's just that we actually have an intuitive sense of justice that is deep, natural law. And we're not going to forget the people Joe Biden abandoned him or that he abandoned them. That we used to count on they would come get us no matter where we were. Just like I come get Selena Zito every week. Follow her at selenazito.com. Follow me the next hour of the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt, inside the Beltway, live on a Wednesday, joined by Congressman Mike Gallagher, who represents Wisconsin in the House of Representatives. Good morning, Congressman Gallagher. Good to have you back.
Good morning, Hugh. Good to be with you.
I want every journalist to ask 6 questions of every member of the Biden administration and Democratic Party. How many Americans are stuck in Afghanistan? Can they get out? How many permanent legal residents of America are stuck in Afghanistan? Can they get out? And how many SIV-eligible Afghans are there stuck in Afghanistan, and can they get out? Those 6 questions. Do you know the answers to any of those?
I don't have the precise numbers on those, but I think the administration's approximation that it's in the hundreds is lowballing it, particularly if you add in LPRs, green card holders, as we should treat those as people we have a duty to get out. If you remember, Hugh, 2 weeks ago, I had a bill on the House floor that would have prevented the administration from withdrawing on the August 31st Taliban demanded surrender date until we had gotten all Americans out of the country, and would have required a daily report to Congress on precisely those numbers, on how many of our people are still there. And the Democrats, even those who behind closed doors were very critical of the administration, who had begged the president and his team to move off of the August 31st surrender date, decided that when push came to shove on the House floor, when they had an opportunity to do something about it and vote with their conscience, decided instead to acquiesce to Nancy Pelosi's progressive demands that they do nothing to endanger the Bernie Sanders $5 trillion spending blowout. And that really was the choice on the House floor. It was between my bill and the $5 trillion framework that would allow budget reconciliation and infrastructure to move forward and now go to the next stage in the Senate. We then had another opportunity the next week with a revised bill that I introduced to demand those numbers, demand a plan post-August 31st to get our people out, a full reporting of the amount of equipment we left behind, a prohibition on any funding going to the Taliban so that we're not paying ransom to get our people out. And as my colleague Mike Waltz and others have suggested, a sense of Congress that we do not recognize the Taliban as a legitimate government in Afghanistan. Yet again, when all the veteran members of Congress went to the House floor to demand recognition that we consider that bill, we were gavelled down by the Speaker of the House. So all of these Democrats, Chuck Schumer and others who say they're laser focused on getting people out of the country, when it comes time to actually do something about it in the United States Congress, are not allowing common sense legislation that involves Congress just doing its oversight role to move forward. And that's shameful because these people are now effectively hostage. We know we have flights grounded in Mazar-e Sharif because of the Taliban. And here's the next stage of this, Hugh. The administration is going to argue that in order to get our people out, we're going to have to provide the Taliban humanitarian assistance and provide them international recognition because they have surrendered all of the leverage to the Taliban. Every time Blinken goes out there and says the Taliban has given us assurances, that is crazy. The Taliban's assurances aren't worth anything. We have given the Taliban all the assurances and all the leverage, and we are completely subject to their whims right now.
So this is America Held Hostage 2.0, day 9, because the hostage crisis underway began on August 31st because we left on August 30th. It's September 8th. So this is America Held Hostage 2.0, day 9. Yesterday on day 8, Chuck Schumer in New York said this, cut number 10.
We've heard a lot of the pullout of Afghanistan would have gone somewhat poorly no matter who did it, but it's on Joe Biden's watch as president. How will what happened affect Democrats' chances moving into the midterms?
You know, I can't predict that. I will say there'll be a job for congressional oversight. There always is. But at the moment, actually, I'm still focused on trying to get some of those brave Afghans out. The Americans, all of whom wanted to come out, have come out, praise God. But there are a lot of Afghans who risk their lives.
That's a lie. Before I go on, Congressman Gallagher, the Americans who have wanted to come out have come out. That's a lie. We know, for example, of the 19 on the air strip at Mazar-e Sharif. Here is Jen Psaki on day 8 of America Held Hostage 2.0. It's now day 9. Here's Jen Psaki in a press gaggle yesterday, mishearing a reporter and then explaining their position. Cut number 19.
Is it a hostage situation, what's happening right now with those airplanes?
If I had $1 for every time this was called dead, it's about once every few weeks. I wouldn't be that rich, but I could buy you a nice cup of coffee.
Sorry, I meant the planes in Afghanistan.
Oh, I thought you were talking about. So that's an important thing. I thought you were talking about the Build Back Better agenda. No, that is not what we would characterize it as. Those were points. Those were comments made by a Republican congressman this weekend. So let me be very clear. We're in touch with American citizens. We're working to get them out. There are 4 who were able to depart over land. Our Secretary of State is in Qatar right now working on a range of options, including getting flights up and operational and going. And what we have seen is that individuals who have documentation are able to depart, or that is what we have seen. But again, we don't have a great deal of understanding of every individual on these manifests.
That is quite simply a lie. And then finally, 10 seconds of Tony Blinken, the Secretary of State, who Chris Wallace on this show said yesterday he's not very impressed with. I don't think any American is. Cut number 11.
Without personnel on the ground, we can't verify the accuracy of manifests, the identities of passengers, flight plans, or aviation security protocols. So this is a challenge.
Challenge. So, Congressman Mike Gallagher, you heard Chuck Schumer lie, Jen Psaki lie, Tony Blinken say it's a challenge. What do you make of America Held Hostage day 9?
Well, it was. It's all the more tragic because it was entirely predictable and predicted. I mean, we don't have people on the ground to do screening. We got all of our people out before we had gotten all American citizens out. And Tony Blinken said something else that's simply not true based on reports I'm getting on the ground. He's saying that, well, we can't get people out because their documentation is either missing or mixed up among various groups. But that's not the case. I have various private sector groups that are on the ground have people with documentation, but they're being told by third-party countries like Qatar that they don't have the ability to get through checkpoints, and ultimately the ability of a plane to leave the ground is tied to Taliban permission, and specifically the Taliban getting what they want in terms of a formation of a government on their terms, which means the U.S. really has no leverage. The Taliban are effectively holding foreign nationals hostage and using them as leverage to get the government they want on their terms with assistance from the international community, and they're tying evacuation to those criteria in that timetable, and in so doing, they're extorting the international community. And for the Biden team to continue its lies after the president brazenly lied for 2 weeks suggests what we've talked about before, Hugh, is they just think that this is something the American people will lose interest in. They think this is a news cycle that can be managed, and they think it'll all blow over, and then Biden can lecture us about climate change in the wake of hurricanes, and then he can hold everybody hostage with the government shutdown in the end of September and somehow pressure Joe Manchin into caving on the budget reconciliation bill, and we'll move on. But the American people aren't going to move on here. What I'm hearing in my district, even among people that I think are more, let's say, isolationist-oriented than I am, is a sense of betrayal. It's a sense of humiliation. This is, I think, tied to what Walter Russell Mead calls the Jacksonian impulse in American foreign policy. Even those Americans who aren't internationalists by orientation, a line gets crossed sometimes where you offend their national pride and their sense of being proud as Americans, and they get disillusioned with presidents who look weak in the face of international challenges. And I think we've crossed that line here. And then I'd add on to that the fact that this undercuts all of the arguments that Joe Biden made for his presidency, whether it's a return to normalcy or a long experience with foreign policy, deep ties to international allies. This fiasco has exposed how all of those were a lie, and I think in so doing undermine the entire rationale for Joe Biden's presidency.
Yeah, Congressman Gallagher, I also believe it's political gangrene, ultimately deadly if you are condescending to people. And if someone is thinking, do you think I'm stupid in their head? Do you really think I'm that stupid? Then that politician is losing. And the idea that the American people don't see through this is deeply condescending and premised on the stupidity and attention span deficit of the collective mass of American voters. That's a bad bet, Congressman Gallagher. That is a very bad bet. When do you get a chance to ask anyone under oath how many American citizens are there, how many green card holders are there, who I think we ought to call Americans, and how many SIV eligible are there? When do you get a chance to put those three questions and then the follow-ons, how are you going to get them out, to anyone with authority?
Well, we have some Armed Services Committee hearings in the third week of September. I don't think our next hearing with the Secretary or with the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs or even Service Secretaries is for a while, because we just wrapped up our NDAA cycle and reported a bill out committee last week. What we really need to do, and I'm happy to do it in a closed-door session first before the cameras come on, is to talk with Secretary Austin and General Milley and the CENTCOM Commander McKenzie about the various decision points that were critical here. And a few come to mind, Hugh. One was just when the administration said, okay, we're drawing down to 600, deal with it, and Milley made the recommendation to abandon Bagram. We need to know what happened in that give and take, and why didn't anyone put their rank on the table, particularly if Milley is suggesting now that, Al-Qaeda is going to resurge in Afghanistan. We're going to have a huge terrorist problem. The other is if, as the Washington Post reports, the Taliban came to us and said, who's going to be in charge of Kabul? And we told them, well, you guys are. Hot potato. It's in your hands. We really need to interrogate.
Yeah, Congressman, I agree. Those are pressing questions. But really the most important question right now is a factual one. How many American citizens, how many American green card holders, how many SIV? I mean, that is just a factual question. They keep thinking, I think they're lying. We think it's somewhere in the low hundreds. How many are you actually in touch with? What's the minimum number? It's so frustrating to me that we can't get an answer out of anybody.
And that's where I think the House Foreign Affairs Committee needs to demand that Secretary of State Blinken and everybody at State involved in this process, because State has point right now, answer those questions under oath in the full light of day, give an accounting. And if the answer is you don't know, then be honest about the fact that you don't know and why you don't know. That needs to happen tomorrow. I think all of the Republicans would be happy to go back into session, in special session, to resolve this question, as we did last week. We all went to D.C. There can be no greater task for Congress, for the executive branch right now, than rescuing Americans that we left behind, that are now trapped behind enemy lines, to be held hostage by the Taliban.
I agree, but they've got to be willing to interrupt and say, stop the talking point. I don't want you to hear that some Americans have dual citizenship and children. I want to know the minimum number that you're in touch with. I mean, it's just, someone has to be an SOB, Congressman. I hope someone is an SOB, the way that Adam Carolla can be with Gavin Newsom, and just really interrupt. No talking point, just the facts, just the number, hard number. Congressman, thank you. Got to run. I appreciate it as always. Mike Gallagher. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Thank you for joining the Hugh Hewitt Show. I am so pleased to welcome now to the program Brian Wesbury, who is with First Trust Portfolio. Brian and I will be in Atlanta on October the 13th. If you head over to am920theanswer.com, you can get a ticket. It's rapidly selling out. We'll be at the Atlanta History Center talking about the Biden inflation that is upon us, whether it's, quote, transitory or not. Brian Wesbury, I got a question for you that's really kind of getting free economic advice for the Nixon Foundation. I got a bunch of money sitting around in an account out there that's not in our endowment account, just a lot of money. It's 7 figures. And it's making 0.035% because the 3-year, it's liquid, right? It's what you need to run an account.
Right.
And we never go below 7 figures. So I'm actually going to call our investment firm out there and say, we're going to send over 7 figures, put it in something. You know, that's the investment committee's decision. I don't do that. But I mean, does anyone just leave money lying around in a 0.035% money market account?
Well, believe it or not, Hugh, there are trillions of dollars being left around in money market accounts these days. A lot of people call it cash on the sidelines. And you know, that's one of the reasons why people are still bullish on the stock market, because there's just so much money in the system that people almost don't know what to do with it all.
Aren't they going to do what I'm going to do, which is to say, this is nuts. I'm losing money. That's going down by 5% a year in value if I don't invest it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, one thing people need to realize is that inflation is a tax on money. And so people get worried, right? We have house prices up over 20% in the past year. We have stock prices up about 20% in the past year, and about 80% from the bottom. You know, you look at gold, it's up to $1,800 an ounce. You look at Bitcoin, it's over 50,000. And so people get worried that if I buy now, I'm buying at the top. And so then what they do is they freeze, and they freeze by putting that money and keeping it in cash. What they don't realize is that inflation taxes it every year, because if you wait a year, and this past year is a great example, all the stuff that you can buy is up in price on average about 5%, which means you can now, you know, if you put $1 away last year, it's only worth 95 cents this year.
And if you're a fiduciary, and I'm a fiduciary over this money,
Yep.
If I'm a fiduciary, I know that next year we have to run the foundation, have to run the library, and it's going to be 5% more expensive to run the library. So the money I just sitting there, I'm just watching it rot away. Well, on the other end, I know it's going to go up 5%, so it's really a 10% swing, isn't it?
Yeah, well, yes. And one thing we have to realize, that owning assets, whether it be stocks or longer-term bonds that have higher interest rates, or anything, a Bitcoin, an ounce of gold, they all have risks. And the question is losing 5%, you know, safer, if you will, than buying stocks and having them go down by 15. And I don't think the stock market is going down in this next year. And that's why it always depends on what you need the money for. You know, if somebody's got money put aside for a down payment on a house, or you have to make your kids' tuition payment, or you have to make your own college tuition payment, you know, keeping it in cash might not be a bad idea, because you can't afford to be down in the short term. So the other thing you need to think about is when you need the money. You know, so if you need it anytime soon, having it in cash, even though it costs you because of the inflation tax, might not be the worst thing to do. It's just, you know, that's why a good financial advisor will ask all these questions, make you think about all of these questions, because there's all kinds of reasons to hold money in cash. And
but
even though you do lose it.
The great rule of American life is inertia. I really do believe that people do not like to deal with money generally, unless they're Brian Wesbury. And so it's just easier to leave it in a checking account and not think about it. But people have to think about it in an inflationary time, right? That's when they have to think about it the most.
Right. There's that was always what I thought about the, if you go down to South America, I mean, Rio de Janeiro, they don't really go out until like 9 o'clock at night. I mean, that's when they start their dinner and they stay. I used to laugh about that because I get it. It's a cultural thing, but I also think it had a lot to do with all the inflation they dealt with, all the economic problems. They had to stay up all the time to make sure the government wasn't taking and stealing their money through inflation when they weren't watching.
Oh, the Argentinian inflation of the 80s when stuff went up 20% overnight. Yeah, you never turned a dollar into whatever the currency was until the moment you needed to buy bread. It was that crazy. Brian Wesbury, look forward to seeing you in Atlanta. Head over to am920theanswer.com, America, to get tickets for Wesbury and I, Alfredo Ortiz, and the Job Creator Network. We're going to be there on October the 13th. I'm going to be here when next hour begins on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt, live inside the Beltway. Hundreds, maybe thousands of American citizens and legal permanent residents remain hostage in Afghanistan. It's America Held Hostage 2.0, day 9. I'll keep you posted as developments occur. But right now, I'm looking forward to introducing you to Bernie Moreno, who joins us from Ohio, the home state, the great land, the Buckeye of all Buckeyes. Bernie, welcome to the program. You're running for Rob Portman's seat in the United States Senate. It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Big fan. Love the show, and thank you for having me.
And Bernie, Rick Grinnell is a huge fan of yours. And he came up to me in California last year. He said, you got to meet Bernie. And I said, I think I met him either on Rattlesnake Island or at the City Club of Cleveland, but I can't be sure. Have we ever met before?
Yeah, not at Rattlesnake Island, because I would have remembered that, although I was a member, but I think it was at the City Club.
Were you at Rattlesnake Island when the 200th anniversary of the Battle of Lake Erie occurred? Because Dave Zavagno took me out then, and that's where I think I may have met you.
As you know, in Rattlesnake Island, there's a lot of beverages that are served, so it's possible that I met you there.
Okay, so if you were there for that amazing day, do you know Zavagno, by the way?
Yes.
Okay, Dave is a dear friend of mine, and he also has great things to say about you. So here's what I want to know, Bernie. People don't know you. Why should they? There's going to be a long list. I'm talking to every Republican. In fact, I'm going to moderate a debate among Republicans because everybody trusts me. There are like a half dozen of you who are serious candidates in Ohio. I'm not going to screw anyone. I don't do gotcha. This is your open forum. Make your pitch. Why should you be Rob Portman's replacement in the United States Senate?
Well, I think actually the whole point is that nobody knows me, right? Because I think one of the things that people are sick of is the same tired politicians or political candidates. I think you more than anybody else know that D.C. is fundamentally broken. So how do you change a place that's broken? You have to change the people and the kinds of people you send there. I think one of the things that's motivated me to run after having a successful run as an entrepreneur in two big businesses and creating two big businesses is that I'm just sick of politicians that say one thing and do another, that have no track record of success. These people have never done anything. They don't know how to make things happen because they've never had to. So for me, this is about a campaign around changing D.C. by changing the kinds of people we send there. And I hope Ohio obviously sends me, but I also hope other states send different kinds of people to D.C. It's the only way we're going to save this country.
All right, now I want to talk to you about Ohio. I'm so Ohio that my youngest son's middle name is actually Ohio. I got that past the fetching Mrs. Hewitt because she didn't have an epidural. She said, I don't care what you name him. So I named him something Ohio Hewitt. So, Bernie, how Ohio are you?
So I moved here 16 and a half years ago. I've been very involved in the community. From the moment we got here, we reestablished scholarship programs at the local community college. We took the graduation rate from 1% for blacks, 3% for Hispanics. We paid for over 300 kids to complete school there and graduated 83% clip. I then was the chair of the board at Cleveland State University, did the same thing there, created an amazing sales center there, served on a bunch of nonprofit boards, one of which was Metro Health. And in fact, when I spoke out against lockdowns last year, so in March, April, May, and June of last year, they started a petition here, the local socialist group, to try to get me off the Metro Health Board because I was saying crazy things. I was saying things like small businesses would be destroyed, the working class would be set back a generation, that closing schools was the worst policy of our lifetime. I said all those things when it wasn't popular. And here's the thing, Hugh, and I hope you ask my opponents this at the debate we have. Why didn't they say one single word? And they had dramatically larger platforms than me. To me, I feel that's totally disqualifying to be silent last year when it mattered. And now, of course, be all about lockdowns are bad and mandates are bad when it's popular.
Bernie, you're working the refs. That's good. You're working the refs. You're trying to get a question in my head. That won't work. I'm good at this. I talked to Chris Wallace about this yesterday, but I applaud you. Where did you come from when you moved to Cleveland, Bernie?
So before that, I was in Boston for 12 years. Before that, I worked for General Motors. I started as an intern. And before that, South Florida, which I moved to when I was a kid from Colombia, South America, where I was born. That's where my parents are from. And so I know how special this country is. And that's the other reason I'm running, Hugh, is we cannot lose America. If we lose America, people like my mom and dad won't have a place to go, and we won't have a place to go. This is the one place on earth where liberty and freedom is important that we maintain.
That's what Grinnell came up to me all excited about you. So you got to meet this guy. He's not from here. He's from Colombia. I said, he's running for the Senate. I mean, then I began to think, I think I may have met him on Rattlesnake Island. So, Bernie Moreno, are you a Browns fan?
Of course. I mean, come on.
Well,
you live in Cleveland, you have to be a Browns fan. Come on now.
No, you know, Jim Renacci is a pal of mine. He roots for the Steelers. That poor misguided guy. Kasich rooted for the Steelers, but you're a Browns guy?
Well, of course. How can you root for your out-of-state team? That doesn't even make any sense. And by the way, the Browns are going to win the Super Bowl this year, so it's good to be a Browns fan.
By the way, you're absolutely right. I have 4 on the 50. I've had them since '99, and this is going to be the year that we do it, that I'm actually going to go to a playoff game. Bernie, in terms of the Republican contest, if you cut each other up into little ribbons, Tim Ryan is a friend of mine. Tim and I went to the same high school. I know Tim pretty well. He's a formidable candidate. Do you guys think you'll bleed each other so much that Tim Ryan will walk through the carnage and win?
Well, we can't let that happen, number one. And Tim Ryan may be a nice guy. I had some interactions with him when I had put together a proposal to save the Lordstown plant. I wanted GM to keep the plant open. I had partnered with a very good friend of mine to be a client of that plant, buy 5 years worth of production and start a ride-sharing service. I talked to Tim. It was a very brief conversation. He really didn't want to have much of a conversation about it. Didn't seem he was very interested. But I will agree with you. He's a formidable candidate because he says one thing and does another. You know, he comes across a very moderate, centrist Democrat, but he votes with Nancy Pelosi and AOC more often than not. He's also been in Congress for over almost 20 years and has very few accomplishments to show for it. So I think for us on the Republican side, we have to make certain that we focus the message on winning and keeping the seat. That's the most important thing. And that's why I think I'm the right candidate, because I'm the one who can win in the general election. I think some of my opponents have been doing a lot of political theater, a lot of stunts that won't help them in the general election. I won't do those kinds of things. I'm not going to burn masks and do crazy things just to get attention. That's just not my style.
Tell me about your family, because actually this makes up a lot of people's minds. Are you married? Do you have kids? Are they in school? What's all that stuff?
Very blessed by you. I married dramatically above my pay grade. So I married my college sweetheart. We got engaged sophomore year. Got married 3 weeks out of school. Had our first child 3 years later, and I have 4 kids, 2 girls, 2 boys. They're all amazing. I just had my first grandchild on the day I announced my campaign. So I have a blessed life. I've had 2 great businesses, an amazing wife, 4 amazing kids, and an amazing granddaughter. And the reason I'm doing this, because I really should be sailing off into the sunset, spending more time on Rattlesnake Island. The reason I'm doing this is because I'm absolutely convinced that this country is about to head off a very dark and dangerous cliff. I saw it in Cuba, saw it in Venezuela, we're seeing it in Peru. I've been to Russia and China, understand what those countries are like. We cannot let America go there.
Bernie, you don't look old enough to have a grandchild, so that's I'll put that aside. Will you tell people how much money it's going to take to win the primary and the general? How are you going to raise it? Are you going to spend your own money?
Well, we raised more money than any other candidate in the race last quarter. We raised more money than Tim Ryan, who was a lone candidate. We raised more money than the other Republican nominees, some of which have had a decade worth of fundraising. So we raised more without putting in my own money and without taking corporate PAC money. So we'll keep that momentum going. And when the time is right, I'll put in my own money. It'll be substantial, but I'm not going to telegraph to my opponents how much that will be because I'm going to keep them guessing a little bit.
Okay, so tell me about the two businesses that you started. I really don't know much about it.
So the first business was a car dealership here in Cleveland. I put every cent I had into that business and then some. I used to joke that my change drawer was my working capital, and grew that business to $1 billion company. We had 15 dealerships that I built on my own in 4 different states, representing 30 brands. Sold that business 2.5 years ago. Then started a technology company here in Cleveland, even though everybody, Hugh, told me, do not do this in Cleveland. You can't start a tech company in Cleveland. Do it anywhere but Cleveland. I did it in Cleveland. We have 60 team members here in Northeast Ohio. Didn't outsource one bit of technology, which is very common in the tech industry. And basically what we do is we use blockchain to digitize car titles. We're up and running in Ohio. We're going to be up and running in West Virginia soon. And we have 9 other states queued up. We just got our Series A funding, another $8.5 million of investment. So we've had $19 million of investment in this company here in Ohio. And by the way, it took exactly 0 of government aid and government incentives to do that.
Bernie Moreno on Twitter. Bernie, I'll give you one tip on a coming question for the debate. What's in it for Warren? I'm going to ask you all, what's in it for Warren, Ohio? So be ready. You've been forewarned. I look forward to having you on as often as they're all on and seeing you in Columbus. Bernie Moreno, I'll be right back, America. Stay tuned to the Hugh Hewitt Show.